Hey guys, this is Jay. As you can tell by my face and what I got going on behind me here, I'm in the middle of working on my truck. As I said in the last video where I went over the gauges, it's time for my annual oil change on this truck, and when I was looking under it, I noticed that the factory lower oil pan was quite rusty, and PPE makes a cast aluminum flat bottom oil pan, so I figured it'd be a good time to do that since I'm already going to do the oil change. So let me spin you around and show you what I got going on over here. As you can see, I already have the factory lower oil pan off, and I even took the low oil level sensor out. A couple quick things to note about the factory pan. As you can really easily see, there is a significant amount of oil that stays behind in this thing. Let me see if I can pick it up with one hand so you can see this. You can see right there the drain plug is on the right, and that hump there is significantly lower than the drain plug. So even with my truck on an inclined driveway and up as high as I can get it on jack stands, there's still about a half a quart of oil that remains. And of course, this being at the bottom of the sump, it's also the dirtiest oil in the system. So this flat bottom oil pan is going to prevent that from happening. Knocking my stuff off here. The drain plug is even with the whole bottom of the pan, and so if you have a little bit of an incline like what I've got set up right here, you should get every bit of oil out of your truck with this new pan installed. This is not going to be a full installation video. I'm largely figuring this out myself, but I will point out some tips and tricks that I've learned while doing this process. So to start, I just got this low oil level sensor out, and it lives in this bung right here, and it was solid. I could not twist it, I could not move it. And what I found out is that if you have a couple open end wrenches, a large one will actually fit perfectly around the outside of this sensor, and so you can hold that in the oil pan like this and kind of break that O-ring loose. The problem is it's still, I mean, you can see that rust ridge in there. Even if you get the O-ring to twist, it's going to be very difficult to push it out the back. So this smaller crescent wrench, you can adjust it to where it'll fit just over the connector like this. You can see that the open end wrench, I'm not striking the connector. I'm hitting the body of the sensor right here. So if you get the open end wrench, the adjustable wrench on like that, and you hit the back side of it with a hammer while the other adjustable wrench is inside the pan, you can twist the O-ring and push it backwards gently, and it'll come out. But take care to not use excessive force, because these are not fun to replace. A couple other things to note during the removal process: it is paramount that you get a 10mm swivel socket. It's the transmission lines are so close to this oil pan that a socket on a swivel is not going to work. You have to have a socket with the swivel built into it because the trans lines are that close. And so I really need to thank my neighbor Lee, who let me borrow this little 1/4 inch socket. And yeah, you probably want it in 1/4 inch drive too, because a 3/8 drive would probably be too big. I mean, this was just enough to get a couple of those bolts out, but it worked. And then as far as breaking the oil pan loose from the seal, as you can tell, GM was not shy with the amount of silicone they put on this thing. I took a small pry bar and I sharpened the end of it, and there is just enough room up inside the truck to where you can kind of get it just above the steel, and then you can peck on the back side of it with a hammer. And it's scary hitting on that cast aluminum upper pan like that, but with how much silicone they used, you got to do it. So you can break it loose over here first. This is the back passenger side of the oil pan, and then there's just enough room to get another bite at it over here, just above the drain plug. and there were a couple studs in the upper oil pan. I believe one was right here and the other one was right here. So if you put the nuts back on those studs, it'll catch the oil pan whenever it breaks loose, so you don't have to worry about it falling on you with all this oil still in it. A couple other things to note about the PPE oil pan. It also has the boss for the sensor and the posts over here to bolt it down, and it comes with socket head cap screws instead of the hex nuts or hex bolts that go in it from the factory, and that makes it a lot easier during installation because you can get you one of these 6-inch ball Allen sockets and have excellent access to all of the fasteners. I'll show more on that whenever I've got the thing under the truck later. Another tip for whenever you're putting this up with silicone on it, I haven't done it yet because I want to take the time to show you guys this. The bolts, of course, go in from the bottom up, so they won't stay in there when you try to put this pan in place. And since you want the silicone to form a thick layer, you don't want to have to hold it up there with your hand and squish all of it out of the joint, or even worse, squish it into the threads of the upper oil pan. So what I'm going to do is take a couple or three of these bolts, probably 3 of them, give me 3 tight points, and tape them with some Scotch tape here into the oil pan so that I can hold it up there close but not touching with my hand, and then grab the ball Allen socket and spin these bolts until the threads catch, and then I can evenly pull the pan up onto the upper pan until the silicone just barely starts to squish out, because I don't want to let all the silicone squish out the sides. I want to leave a layer of thickness between the two and let that cure and then torque the bolts down. A lot of people don't do that. That's the best way to ensure you get a good seal, is to allow it to set up with some thickness between the two surfaces and then tighten the bolts. All right guys, as you can tell, the installation was successful. It has been it's been over 3 weeks since I did this. I just wanted to make sure that there weren't going to be any leaks, and it's kind of hard to get this camera in everywhere, but it is dry all the way around. This stuff right here I think is some penetrating oil and other stuff from whenever I hosed all these bolts down to remove it. There are no oil leaks. One thing I just noticed that I am going to need to address, this lower trans line is resting on the oil pan right back up in there, so I'm going to need to insulate that so I don't rub through this line. That's something I've heard happening before. Also, as I said, I wanted to show you later just how useful this long ball Allen socket is. As I already said, since this trans line runs so close to the oil pan, it also gets in the way of these fasteners, particularly this one right here. But the ball Allen sockets let you easily get up into all of the problem bolts. This one's not too bad, but this one right here, you kind of got to go between the lines, and you can. It comes out there. I think you can also get to it from here. Just flex the line a little bit, and without, you can see how tight that is. It's almost impossible to get out. I mean, without this long ball Allen socket, I don't know how I would have done this, because clearly, if you have just a ball Allen socket that only has that much stick out, you're not going to get that up in there. You really need these 6-inch ball Allens, and I got the whole metric set from Advance Auto for like 40 bucks. And as long as you don't torque down too tight on these, they'll last forever. You can't use a long ball Allen to break, you know, super tight bolts loose. You'll just shear off the tip. But for tightening bolts like this and super hard to reach places, you can't beat it. Also, I wanted to show you the only 2 locations that you can actually get something between the 2 oil pans whenever you're trying to break it loose. You can get a pry bar right up in here on this side. This is the passenger side, and then I'll slide on over to the other side real quick and show you that. Pretty much right up in there. I mean, that's it was not fun to do, but you have just enough access to it around the front drive shaft. You probably want to turn the U-joint to where it gives you the most access on the bottom, but you can get to it in 2 places, and that's all you need. The only real difficulty that I had to kind of undo some factory stuff to deal with was, for whatever reason, it seems like this low oil level sensor is not quite in the same place. I don't know if the geometry of the side of the oil pan is a little bit different, but the wiring harness for it is maxed out. I mean, you can see how hard they're kind of putting a bind. You can see that clamp up in there. That's actually where the harness is supposed to be routed through. Fortunately, I was able to take it out of that clamp and get a little bit more length on it to be able to plug it in. But it did fit, fortunately. The putting the tape on the screws sounded a little bit better before I did it than it actually worked. It was helpful. I think the main thing that I would do differently is instead of using tape that is pulled taut over the bolt heads, I would jam the tape into the hex with the ball Allen before trying to put the pan up, because with the tape pulled taut over the bolt heads, I wasn't able to get the ball Allen up in there. So I did have to do quite a bit of just holding the thing up there with my hand. But I didn't have any trouble getting it in place. Even around these transmission lines up here, once you just have to kind of tuck it up in them, and you just snake that side up in there first, and then you can lift the rest of it up into place. And of course, you know, this cross member is not here, so you have all the access you need on the bottom. And yeah, and just follow the bolt torquing sequence from PPE, and then of course go around all of it again just to make sure everything is torqued to spec. And the spec is very loose. You know, these don't need to be tight to get this to seal. And use plenty of silicone, let it set up according to the manufacturer specs. You know, don't torque the bolts until it's set up for an hour, and then let it fully cure before you put the oil in, and you won't have any issues. I'm super pleased with this, and I guess I'll in a year I'll show you how much better the oil change is, since this drain plug is actually at the bottom of the oil pan. Well, as I said under the truck, I'm really pleased with how this turned out, and I'm excited to not have a whole bunch of oil left over the next time I do the oil change. That's going to be good. You can really see how clean those bypass filters can keep the oil over an extended period of time, since they don't have that half a quart of the old stuff to deal with like before. So yeah, let me know what questions you have about this. You know, like I said, I'm not posting the full installation process because I was figuring it out myself. But now that I've done it, I can answer any additional questions you may have in the comments. But this really wasn't hard to do. It was filming the key points was more difficult than the process itself. As long as you have those tools that I mentioned, that 10mm swivel socket and the 6-inch ball Allen socket, you really shouldn't have any trouble with it. It's just time and patience, especially on breaking the oil pan loose from the top pan. That was the scariest part, is having to whack on that thing with a hammer to separate those. But if you can get to the 2 points that I showed under the truck, then with some persistence, you shouldn't have any trouble getting it off. But like I said in that short video, I've got a lot of parts for the front end of this truck that I'm getting ready to install, and I towed a skid steer and trailer that totaled about 11,000 pounds with this truck earlier, with the all the stock stuff on the front, and so that's going to have to go back where we got it from in a week or two. So I'm really excited to be able to do a before and after on the front end, with with a real load on the truck, and not just me driving it around town. So I'm hoping to get some good footage of this thing pulling a heavy trailer. That was by far the heaviest thing I've ever pulled. It was a few thousand pounds heavier than that 15-passenger van I was towing in my upgrade lowdown video on the Economine tuner and technical or intercooler. So this is really showing you what this truck can do. I had it in level 6 and it pulled it like a champ, guys. I'm super happy with this truck, and I'm excited to be able to share the upgrade process with you all. So as always, thanks for watching, and remember, if it's smoking, it's broken.